Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and because it's a Tuesday and because it's a podcast, it's another great week of a great podcast. So we thank you for being here, all of you wonderful listeners out there that have made us a global top 10% podcast. As usual, you can reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, hit like and subscribe, and you know the deal, right? Do things for us so that we can do things for you. Tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And you can even go into the show notes somewhere and find a magic link to buy me a coffee. That would be a wonderful thing. Hey, today we have a special big brain smart head with us. We have a heritage plasterer and carver, a teacher, an instructor I met last year on my European summer school, not vacation, Harry. And he is an all-around great guy, none other than Patrick Webb. Patrick, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Very happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, taking the what do we call it, the great career risk of coming on the show. I met Patrick last summer in Bruges for the second half of my summer escapades, and Patrick was he was not the main teacher guy, but he covered a lot of different things for us. Certainly early on in the course, his wife was there as chef extraordinaire in our little convent where we were staying. So it was wonderful to get to know Patrick and Angela. Patrick covered a massive amount of things, everything from drawing to learning the geometry and some of the mathematics that behind what we were doing with our compasses and straight edges. But the thing that struck me the most was the focus on philosophy and metaphysics behind this highly artistic realm of architecture. Patrick, is that what was your, from the teacher side of that class thing? What was the nature of the school? 30 students there of architecture from around the world, and you get to teach all of those wonderful things.
Yeah. Well, of course, where we were teaching really helped a lot. Being in Bruges, there's this wonderful city with centuries of built history. Right up until the contemporary time, 20th century, Gothic architecture was still being built there. So it was lovely to walk those streets and then look at the aesthetics of it all. It's a pretty place, and then to reproduce some of those in drawings and a little bit by hand in craft. But all of these things that we enjoy. In fact, people come from around the world to see. Pilgrimage. It becomes a pilgrimage site for beauty. Didn't just come out of thin air. It comes from a place. It comes from a way of thinking that's quite generative of a place like Bruges. So that's what we were trying to scratch the surface a little bit and see. How do places like Bruges come to be? It was more than just figuring out how to draw an arch or a tracery window. I think it was a bit deeper than that, and we were trying to reach some of the students with that, because I'm pretty sure they don't get that in university.
That is one thing that struck me, and I'm sure I've mentioned this in the descriptions I had last summer of the course, that so many students were feeling that their architecture coursework left them had huge holes in it, and some of it was that idea of how do you make something. They learned how to, I don't know, I guess how to design a window or something like that. But why should you do what you do? How do you make it beautiful? How do you make it something that is going to be long lasting and not just aggravating or in a new sense, something to create news? How do you do that? And we recently connected on the LinkedIn machine, and I see that you are. I put some quotes. I pulled some quotes off your posts here, Patrick.
Okay.
of the last several days. Especially so in architecture, it is best to cleave closely to nature. Beauty is the only thing that we can all possibly comprehend. Beauty is the truth spoken in our mother tongue. This sounds like these are like advertisement slogans for the buff here. Okay. The underlying metaphysical assumption, man's relation to the divine and his place in the cosmos, lie at the very heart of a meaningful understanding of any architectural tradition. And these seem like statements, Patrick, that really drove a lot of the conversations that were had about the philosophy underneath what makes a place like Bruges a place like Bruges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think, architecture in general, the things that we build, they're a physical manifestation of a way of thinking, and that way of thinking comes first. And once you begin to see the world a certain way, think of the world in a certain way, then you're shaping your environment to match that worldview. And the reason Bruges looks the way it does is because the people who built it over centuries had a certain worldview. I mean, I think a lot of times it just gets attributed to economy. Well, they were prosperous, they were able to do X, Y, and Z. It's not that, having some, financial wherewithal won't enable you to do certain things. But I would say compared to today's standards, our incredible capacity to generate wealth, it withered anything that, medieval Bruges was able to generate. So there was a certain type of care, a certain type of love that's quite evident, and it's imbued in the very stones and the very bricks and timbers that were raised. It's evident that there are people that had a vision of the future, and their role in it, and then it just, like a flower, it unfolded to create that magical place.
Yeah, it was. I said a couple times, both where we were in Alsace at Bar France in Alsace, and then at Bruges. Well, it was like living in a fairy tale for me for whatever it was, 8 weeks. There was so much there that it's difficult to comprehend from my chair sitting here in a suburb of Indianapolis. It is difficult to comprehend even constructing a place like those places I was in. It is, you probably can't hear it because the windows are very good here, but right outside my window now is a dump truck that has been running its little diesel engine for the last 2.5 hours, because I guess people don't like to shut off diesel engines. So the diesel truck pulled up with a bobcat on the trailer on the back. They've been bobcatting the lot to get it ready to put a new house up, and the diesel has been running for hours here. And the noise, the complexity, the heart, like it is not the soft and gentle place that we found there. And part of that's our modern age. I got it, that there are things that we live with now that give us certain conveniences. We have some of those trucks that come and go. They put in internet lines so we can do what we're doing right now. I mean, so I understand that those things are part of it. But I can't live my life without my car. I can't even walk to the coffee shop that is less than a mile away from me because of the complexity of the road systems. It was a magical place to be in Bruges, to live in a lifestyle that let me breathe a little bit more, gave my ears a rest, and got me to use my feet.
Mm-hmm.
So you had said along those lines, here's another one of your little quotes. All great architecture originates in the spiritual, an offering of one's best to the divine. When the political supplants the divine as the highest ideal, there is degradation. And when the personal and commercial assumes primacy, there only remains decadence and impending civilizational collapse. Now, I would not say that you are necessarily an optimist about the current state of our civilization. We've talked about lack of sustainability of just doing what we do. I take it you feel we are running the risk of degradation, decadence, and civilizational collapse because our focus is not properly aligned.
Yeah. Well, I tend not to be optimist, or try not to be an optimist about the wrong things. And so, I think there's so much focus on two particular things that seem to be in conflict in modern times, and that is the economy and the ecology. And, I like to sometimes look back at etymology, at the roots of words, because sometimes, that long lost heartbeat still throbs. You can still find it there. And we kind of see those things in the modern ages, but completely in conflict. We have economic interests, and they are in conflict with ecological interests. And sometimes this, plays out in political lines or social lines. But really, in ancient times, these words were synonyms, because eco means oikos, came from oikos, the Greek oikos, and it just means home. And so, the economia was the management, or you could say stewardship of the home. And the ecology was the logos of the home, the knowledge essentially to run that home. So those concepts were very closely aligned. So any kind of economic interest that doesn't take into account ecologic interest, is an oxymoron. It's absurd. And in the end, there's really no wealth but life.
Right.
And so a society that can sustain itself is one that's at stasis. It knows the oikos, it knows its home, what's around it, and it's a good steward to it. And then that's going to lead to long-term stability, long-term wealth, because they can engender more and more life. And humans, we forget this, but we kind of sometimes think of humans as locusts. Wherever humans go, there's devastation. But I know from seeing some simpler societies, even in the present day, certainly looking back just a short time ago to, for example, medieval or even Renaissance village life in Europe, that sometimes people would settle an area, and because they settled there, it increased what was essentially a wilderness. It increased the capacity for life. The place was better because we were a part of it, because people were very conscientious of their local environment, and they knew what grew there and what animals thrive there, and they're just very, very, very conscious of what was around them. And this is true wealth. So,
yeah, that is we've been there's. I have a take similar to that. Is that this planet? I'll say this planet was made for us. That's generally how I phrase it. And that if you're not careful, you can take that to mean, oh, great, we can do with it whatever we want. And that's not at all what I mean there. I'm as much a lover of the forests and the mountains as anybody. But you're right. There are places that if we're not there, they may make great places for snails and slugs. But the real value that we bring lots of diversity. We bring opportunity for all sorts of different things to create, like you said, to create that stasis that we value. And I keep thinking about, I'm wondering how much of like you mentioned, medieval times, we have a picture, I think, that we've been told about, I'll call it the Middle Ages, pre-Renaissance kind of things, where little, people eked out these miserable little lives living in, Monty Python and the Holy Grail does that with, the commune living in the dirt, right? And that we get the perspective that that's how it was. And the more I read and the more I see, I think we have been sold a false bill of goods on that, is that there were places that were very stable for very long periods of time, and stable in ways that I never imagined could be. I have to go find this again. I was reading somewhere that there were places where economically, in the current sense of the word, economically, prices stayed stable for decades, if not centuries of time. There was no such thing as inflation. Things just kind of, there were barterings, and if there was money, well, the money had pretty much a constant value, and that comes from a stasis kind of place that people are born there, they grow up there, they may go away, they bring some knowledge back. Some people come in and out, but in general, the hamlet stays the same. I'm not sure we all need to live in the Hobbit's Shire, but I have to believe that things were not the terrible just despair that has been sold to us in the Middle Ages. I think there was a lot of, like I said, there was stasis, and the stasis probably was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it was Napoleon that might have said that, history is a lie agreed upon by the victors. So they're the ones who get to tell the story. And, the victors of our society has, which is now an industrial society, increasingly a digital society, the ones with a great voice to kind of basically, explain and justify the way things are by, in many cases, degrading anything that came before. And, I would say that much of our wealth so-called wealth that we have today is kind of a dark magic. And what I mean by that is I use the illustration taken from ancient mythology. They're Plutonian riches. And Pluto was the Roman god of two things, really. He was the god of wealth, but he was also the god of death, the underworld. And so if you look at our contemporary society, unlike, previous, civilizations, or even just villages and tribes who tended to get their wealth from nature, let's say, from maybe a bit of husbandry and farming, but many times foraging, and sometimes it was a nomadic lifestyle, sometimes it was more sedentary, fishing, just normal human activities, food, clothes, and shelter. Those were really the concerns: food, clothes, and shelter. Simple things. But our transfer into this type of plutonium society, which has taken place since really the dawn of cities, since civilization in that sense, has been about digging up wealth from underground. We think about everything: uranium, lithium, oil, coal, all this wealth that we generate, incredible amounts of wealth, but that wealth tends to be all toxic and poison, and it poisons us.
Right.
We're drunk on this, and so it's question: is it good for us? Are we better off with it? And because it's true, you don't get maybe the highest of highs in a small village or a tribe. You don't get an opera in a village,
right.
But you don't get a thermonuclear device either.
Right. And there's this. Maybe it's a tension. Maybe it's just two sides playing back and forth. But there's this question of, technology. We say on the show here quite a bit that technology marches forward, but the nature of man stays the same. So we have things that look like new problems, but they're really old problems that put on a new, I guess the kids would call it, they put on a new skin in a computer mentality. I don't. I think some people could hear what you're saying and say, "Well, look, this guy's a Luddite. He wants to go back to horses and plows and tin cans and string telephones instead of look what a hypocrite on a podcast talking about how we need to." But I don't think you're saying that. I think the statement probably is one more of we need to put the focus in the right way so that the technology serves us in the ways that can serve us, and we make the best use of the best technology. And latest isn't always greatest. And if it's not serving us as humans, then it's not doing us any good.
Well, technology in itself is an interesting word because, there we have logos again, the logos.
Yep.
So, which is associated with the truth, what's right. Mm-hmm. Knowledge right. is sometimes the way it's translated. And then techne has to do with craft, specific type of craft. Techne was either stonemasonry or timber framing, essentially, what we would call timber framing right. today. So that's where the word comes from. So I think in the modern contemporary use, everyone's thinking, well, technology is we're always chasing it. It's out there. It's in the future. It's what's next. It's high technology. It's actually a black box to most of us because we don't know we don't really understand it. It's like magic to us. But technology has always had the meaning of this kind of craft knowledge, these simple things that have mainly to do with shelter. And and a lot of that technology, I think, would be of incredible value to us today. Like we're so concerned about what we don't know and what we're chasing that we're leaving behind and forgetting all of this technology that took actually millennia to accumulate. We're leaving it all behind. I'll give you one example. Just stone masonry. We saw incredible, stone masonry in Bruges. That's done to an extremely artistic level, awe-inspiring. But even just simple stone masonry to create housing, there's no more sustainable material for us to build out of than stone. Stone is, we live on a dirty rock. There's no end to stone. And all it takes is about, 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day to work stone with the simplest of tools, So just a chisel, mallet, and a square is just about all you need to do to work stone. So we talk about a sustainable material, sustainable technology for building. Well, there's stone. And now the way we build today, of course, is we mine incredible amounts of calcium, carbonate, lime, and clay and from the earth, and then also iron ore to create all this building out of steel reinforced concrete. And you don't have to dig very far to understand that building that way, just in the construction, architectural construction and infrastructure, that consumes about 15% of the world's energy right now, as well as contributes to about 15% of the world's pollution. It's about the same. And we don't have to build that way. We have an existing technology that is enduring, can last for centuries or millennia, and has absolutely no ecological impact on the environment, can be extraordinarily comfortable and to live in. And but we say we can't afford it, And I look at these other materials. It's like I'm not against steel or concrete, but I understand that there's something very precious, more precious than gold, because of the amount of energy we must expend to manufacture them.
Right, right.
The amount of environmental degradation it causes in their manufacture and their decay and their use. It's like, I'm not saying we shouldn't ever use them, but that should be used very, very sparingly. The game has to be worth the candle. We need to use the cheap materials. We need to use stone and marble to build.
Where does that come from? Where does that idea that we can't do what we've done before? Where does that come from? Why are you a lone, what do they say it, a voice crying out in the wilderness? All right. Why is that not the common statement? Is it just it's not sexy, it's not new? Is it the people who shout the loudest get get all the dollars?
I think it's more than that. I think we don't build the way we used to because we're not the same people as we used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires a lot of self-examination. Why don't we think the way we used to? Somewhat tied up in that is this kind of this what I would call a false notion of progress. We hear that word a lot. Technology is kind of tied up with this. High
Mm-hmm.
technology is tied up with this idea of progress, and but very seldom is it asked what really, if you're making progress, what are you progressing towards? And that question is seldom asked. It's just like a magical incantation. We just use the word progress, and everyone cheers, and away we go. And but what are we progressing towards? What is the end goal? And I think I look at our contemporary civilization, and I get the feeling that I think anyone does upon a moment's reflection is that we're lost. We're lost at
Sure.
sea.
Yep.
We have all these fancy toys, and we can create things that probably in the past would have been looked like as godlike powers. But what are we doing with it?
Yeah, that's one of those. When I see the kids at the restaurants, all with all their little buddies, all sitting around the table, not talking to each other on their little phones, and I think that they're holding in their hands essentially the world's repository of knowledge. I mean, you can make an argument that you can get any question answered and asked on that machine, and yeah, we can argue about what's out there, what's not out there, but they have more knowledge in any book form than the Library at Alexandria did, or any of the modern libraries now. I mean, just the amount of information they get is incredible, and they're using it to scroll through. I'll say cat videos is what I typically call it, but it's I think you're sitting around with your friends, and the greatest resource on the planet is right in front of you, and you're ignoring it for this magic machine that would, in a certain sense, it will. You can do things on your phone that would have gotten you burned at the stake in the Middle Ages. I mean, it's a magical device, but you're right. It's not directing us toward a purpose, and that leaves us lost, as you say.
Socrates said that anything truly important should never be written down. And yes, we have this incredible repository of knowledge in the internet, whatever that is. But so many of the things that is important for a human being to know can't even be expressed in language. Myself as a craftsman, I've learned this. In my particular craft, to be a plasterer, you can read, you can watch videos all day long until you pick up plaster and move it yourself through time after time and time. You can't learn to plaster. You can't learn it vicariously. It's an embodied form of knowledge. And I think this is what society has lost. It's become so abstract, so linguistic, that it's become, in a way, too spiritual, and it's lost its animal foundation. At the end of the day, we are creatures, we are animals, we are bodies, And there's so much innate knowledge wrapped up in our humanity, in our sensational existence.
What was fascinating last summer when we were in Bruges watching when the stone carver guy came and said, "Okay, here's how you're going to hold the chisel. Here's how you hold the mallet, and then you go whack like this." And he did that, and like this big piece of rock fell off, and it had a beautifully cleaved face, and everything looked good. And he was like, "Hey, so now you guys do it." And people pick up the thing, and they pick up the chisel, and they miss, and they can't get it. But over the next several hours of tink, 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 tink on the stones, you could see everybody kind of developed the muscle memory and the practical ways to do that. And I know here in the wood shop, I can see that when I bring somebody, like I carved a picture frame, put the Latin around the picture frame. And when I first started practicing with that, the carving chisels were, they were, it's like riding a bike for the first time. It felt wobbly, right? But then toward the end, I noticed I could see myself more comfortable with that. And then somebody would come over and say, "Well, can I try to do that?" And you could see how they were behind that they didn't have that experiential learning thing that I had picked up over my practice, and that the chisel guy, the stone carver guy knew. And like, about play. I mean, you know how it feels when it's mixed right, and when it's setting up, or when it's it's time for us to, I don't know, to re-wet it, or whatever you do with plaster, right? You know about those things because you've lived them. But the knowledge does, when an AI bot can give you the knowledge that you need, it seems to me like maybe we really don't need that knowledge. That there's something about that knowledge that seems empty, that seems like a hole. And I'm going to give, we're holy cow, we're 31 minutes into this episode. I want to go two things with you before we wrap up, because we don't have, what do they say? Had we but whirled enough in time? We have neither of them. Okay, so we have. I want to ask you about the AI approach to the craftsmanship thing, because you've been approached with regard to teach our AI bots how to carve things, and I want you to go there. But then I want to also go, where can we go that will take us to the good? What can we do? Like, there's technology. We're in the world that we're in. We can't just crawl into a hole. You were put here in this time for a reason. What do we do moving forward? So let's start with the AI carving, and then go to what should we do?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I was working most of last year, aside from Bruges, I was in Morocco working with carvers there, learning their tradition, Moorish carving. And they're coming from a very spiritual place. They're all Sufi Muslims. All the master carvers are Sufis, and if you know anything about Islam, that's kind of like the mystic branch of Islam. So it's not big on doctrine; it's a lot on doing. And so you'll find like a lot of the artists, a lot of the musicians, a lot of the craftsmen are Sufis, and they practice their faith by trying to bring more beauty into the world.
Okay,
my type of guys.
Yeah. I can see that.
Right at home, and I'm learning now. I just came out of a Moroccan Arabic class, and now I'm probably slightly conversational. But particularly when I started, I didn't speak any Darija, they call it, the Moroccan dialect of Arabic. So when I was working with them, how do you communicate? Well, actually, it was quite easy, because you communicate by doing. They can't actually teach me how to carve. It doesn't matter if I spoke Darija or not, because that's not how you learn how to carve. You learn to carve by observing a little bit, getting a pat on the back for a little emotional support, but then you got to carve for hours. Right. And that's how you learn how to carve. And so for these gentlemen, AI it's blasphemy. That's what it is.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's blasphemy, because what they do is sacred. And the idea of a machine a soulless machine supplanting a human being, because it's not about just the aesthetics. It's about they understand their role in society, their importance as artisans to do what they're doing to help create a beautiful society.
Okay.
It's not the objects; it's the action of the sympathetic act of communication. Um, I could talk about the technical sides of AI. I mean, the one thing that the Earth isn't lacking right now is human beings. We have more human beings than we've ever had. So the idea of replacing every human activity imaginable, physical or mental, with machines in for the, you know, basically to offer us up upon the altar of progress and efficiency as a burnt offering is ludicrous. Machines, like I said, we operate on 4 to 5,000 calories a day. All these machines take tremendous amount of,
Amounts of
it's again
power.
those
Yeah, yeah.
plutonian riches, all the silicon wafers and the lithium, and you can just go on and on and on. That it's suicidal. It's genocidal to think that we would replace human beings. It's like work is viewed like any physical activity, sometimes even mental activity, is an anathema. It's like it's an indication of low status or something, as if people don't enjoy their work.
Right. Right. Well, that is a that's a wonderful take on that. I hadn't quite put that together with I'm thinking about all those things you said, but with the carvers, the Muslim carvers, that actually doing that work is it's a sacred activity, and there's there's a long tradition of the value of work in the West as well, toward creating truth, beauty, and goodness in those lines. And you're right. We have lots of people. They work on. They require substantially less energy. Now, there's going to be there's the pushback. I can imagine somebody thinking, as you were saying this, like, but Patrick, if we have the machine doing the carving, then it can be perfect every time. We can get exactly the same thing, and it'll be more perfect, and it'll be efficienter, and it'll be better because it's perfect.
Well, it won't be perfectly human, which is good
Right,
enough
right,
for me.
yeah.
Because the things that we create as human beings, let's say I'm creating some ornament.
Sure.
Let's say Michelangelo is creating some ornament, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can assure you that anything that he would create, a leaf, an acanthus leaf, or a flower, if you actually were to take his clumsy thing that he carved in marble and compare it to an actual acanthus leaf out there in the field, I mean, nature withers whatever puny effort he made. The amount of detail, the more you look with a microscope, the
Right.
more you're going to see. The
Right,
beauty
right.
just goes on and on and on. The only reason that we appreciate the work of Michelangelo or myself or any artist is because it's an act of communication. It's like Michelangelo looked at an acanthus leaf. He saw 3 or 4 things that he's going to clumsily do in stone. And like your little kid who proudly shows you his drawing, that he did, puts a smile on your face because it's like you recognize what he was trying to communicate. It's a sympathetic act of communication. It's one human being related to another. That we don't relate to machines. We relate to one another, and it's pointless. It's pointless to do these things.
Yeah, and that's one reason why the kids sitting around the table at the burger shop, instead of interacting with their friends, are interacting with the machines, and it is so frustrating to see. The most frustrating thing for me is to see 2 parents and 2 children out to eat, and the parents are on the phones and the kids are. It's just, and I tell you, I did a dad mode thing. Actually, I think it was yesterday. We were out for lunch. It was a beautiful summer day here, and we walked one of the bike paths here through Indianapolis down downtown, and we had lunch outside. It was just wonderful. And there was a couple behind us. They were there with their two children, and they had brought like, I don't know, they bring these keep them busy things, and they would like games. They had like questions on cards, and they would ask the questions, and they dialogue and talk, and they were talking about all sorts of things, dinosaurs and Socrates and Plato, and I both Plato and Plato, right? Probably. And I actually did the dad mode thing, and I said to them as I left, I said, it brings me joy to see you with your children this way. And I told the little girls, I said, you have wonderful parents. And they were all, they got all teary eyed, and I got all teary eyed. And as I was leaving, I noticed that the next table over had two parents on the phone, and their kid was on a tablet as well. And I felt like I had insulted them, but it's so good to see that. It's stunning to me that I have to be moved by something that is so natural. But we've removed all that, and we are interfacing. They said we are trying to relate to machines, but the machines don't care. They have no sympathy. They have no empathy. They are more red in tooth and claw than nature is, and that's a recipe for a problem. So where do we go? What do we do? What's the take here? What should we take? Because we've talked a lot of different things about where technology is, in particular AI. How do we think about carving? How do we think about art? If you were to tell, what's the way to direct your life toward the good that will help bring you joy? Something that, other than, put down the phone and go touch some grass. That's what the kids all say, right? But what's your take? What do you tell them when the people are not happy with the current state of things? What do we do?
Yeah. Well, I don't have any big solutions. I think sometimes big is the problem, So I don't have any big grand political solutions to even suggest, or anything along those lines. For me, I think this course that, for the most part, society has embarked upon is irreformable. That's my experience. There's no reforming it. It has its own momentum. It's going to have to go through its cycle. It's clearly not sustainable, so at some point it will collapse. And I'm not happy about that, because I know at that moment in time, it's going to be a lot of unnecessary suffering.
Right.
And
okay.
Nobody likes to see that. So I'm not wishing for this to come, But that being said, what I try to do in my own life is hold on to the things of value that existed prior, and then pass that technology along, keep it alive for at least another generation. Fortunately, I've recently hired 4 young men. I don't know what's changed in the last year, I would say, because for years I tried to interest young men and women in what I was doing, and really, I think there was a stigma surrounding working with your hands. People
Right.
couldn't distinguish craft from just, the lowliest form of labor. It was just seen as, low status, and nobody wanted to touch it. No young person would touch it. They were counseled against it. But I don't know what's happened in the last year, but all of a sudden I have young people seeking me out to learn, and it's
That's wonderful.
so nice to work with them. It's so refreshing to have that energy. These, in this particular case, it's young men, and young ladies. They're welcome too.
Right. Yeah.
We've got lots of work, lots of people who would like to see more beauty in their own lives, and are reaching out to me to do something done with one's hands, let's say. So yeah, I feel a responsibility now to, as I have this interest, I will pour myself out like an offering to them.
Right.
Um, in craft, I think that's a word that's kind of gotten a stigma in modern society. Master. We're no longer allowed even to call things like a master bedroom. You have to call
Right,
it
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
the owner bedroom. I don't know how the owner is any better than master, but
No, no, I.
um, or the principal bedroom.
Yes, yes.
But in the context of craft, getting back to that, like
Mm-hmm.
what mastery meant was really had to do with competence. It's not a
Right,
master of
right,
other
right.
people. It's master of yourself, so that you're able to work with these materials that have their own ways. It's not
Right.
even about mastery of the materials; it's mastery of yourself. It's self control. It's self mastery. And but what happens is when you become a master, once you've reached ostensibly what's considered the high point, you actually go to the very bottom. And I mean the absolute bottom, because the apprentices are coming in, up the ones that apprehend, the ones that are learning, and you're basically become their servants. You're the minister. So master literally means great man from Latin.
Mm-hmm.
Minister means the lesser man. And to be a master, the highest honor of a master is to convert himself and become a minister, because now it's your turn to actually serve
To
the
serve,
people
yeah,
on the
yeah.
bottom. And that's my role now. And I think I've been given tradition, something passed across the threshold to me by many masters. I've been given something of an incredible value, a way to provide, in my case, shelter in this world that is completely sustainable, connected to nature, communicates the beauty of nature to others through the things we make. And I want to now spend, the last part of my career passing that on. And so in my personal life, it's very idiosyncratic, I know, but in my personal life, this is what I'm trying to do, for the cliche to one day make the world a better place.
Yeah, that's a that speaks. We talk a lot about love here too, as well, and that speaks of great love, because that is it's a servant, it's a giving of yourself, and it's willing the good of the other, and that's a thing I think we all should try to do. Anybody who wants to get to the top so that they can reign over others, those are the people who are. I think history has shown us that those are the people that ought not to have that power in the first place. But it is a wonderful thing to hear that these young men are doing this with you now. And you work with a company, Preservation Works, right?
Yes.
And that's a great pun, by the way, Preservation Works, right? Because it does. And the website is preservationworks.us. Is that right? They can go there and look at some of the things. You can see a picture of Patrick doing plastery things. You can see some of the beautiful.
I thought it was .us. Oh, I guess you're
well,
right.
I think it is .us. I don't know how they pick those things. It's there's a certain what do you call it? There's vestigial things in naming. And that's the thing. Okay. So that is, but Patrick Works doing that kind of thing. And now with a number of apprentices who are apprehending him on a daily basis, it is, that's wonderful to hear. And you are, I'm sure if people want to find you, they can dig around, look for Patrick Webb on the LinkedIn machine. You can find him there. You can find him at preservationworks.us. And if you really can't find him, send me a note and I'll hook you up with him. But it's, Patrick, it has been fantastic having you on today. I'm so glad you were able to come.
Thank you, Rafe.
All right. So the rest of you out there, remember, as always, seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.